Welcome to the Fanspeak Network. I'm your host, Megan Shoup. You can follow me on Twitter at Megs08DFS. And today I'm joined by my brother Steve to talk best ball drafts. You can find Steve at SteveOSpeak. Steve, how many best ball drafts have you done today?
I think I've done two puppies so far today. A bunch of
Okay.
slow drafts going. So,
Okay, awesome. Well, we're super excited to talk about best ball day. And what we're going to talk about is the importance of the tight end position in best ball drafts. But before we get to that, please like this episode and subscribe to the Fanspeak Network. We're just starting to grow the Fanspeak Network. So I'd really appreciate if you would subscribe and tell a friend. Also, Steve mentioned Underdog and the puppy drafts. We have a code for you. If you use code FANSPEAK, all caps, FANSPEAK, you can get 100% deposit bonus up to $100. So you can join us in some puppy drafts. And they got of course, the big, what is it? The best
best
ball
ball,
maiden,
yeah,
best
three.
ball. Yeah, you can shoot for $2 million top prize. So, anyways, with that, let's jump right in and talk about tight ends in best ball draft. You just wrote an article today, Steve, about that and kind of like the tight end tiers. So first I want to ask you about taking like an elite tight end versus taking like three of the kind of mid to late round tight ends. Kind of what are your pros and cons to each strategy?
So I think the first thing to remember is, comparing best ball compared to, say, your redraft, your home leagues. Uh, you can dodge when you're playing head to head. You can dodge big games by the Travis Kelce's, the Mark Andrews, George Kittles. These guys were putting up 25, 30 points in multiple games last year, and you hopefully are not playing them the week that they're doing that when you're playing the team that has them. You're not doing that in best ball. It's most points matter, whether you're doing the tournament structure through the first 14 weeks, the most points matter, or the whole 17 weeks if it's just like a 12-team league. So every time one of those guys go off, you're losing ground to them. And ideally you can mix and match a couple tight ends and get a similar score, season long score, but that's not so easy. You need to find the right ones. And even then, like those times where Travis Kelce only has a 6 point game or Mark Andrews has a 6 point game, those teams probably have one or two tight ends that are hopefully increasing their total tight end score. So even then, you're maybe not catching up as much as you hope you are. It is viable, but I do think it's even harder when it comes to tournaments, because once you get to those tournament weeks,
Mm-hmm.
a tight end putting up 25 points, a tight end putting up 30 points, boy, those teams are just so far above the rest of the field, because most weeks you only have one, maybe two tight ends who can exceed 20 points. So if somebody's putting up 35 points, he might even be 15 points above the next highest tight end or in the lowest 20s. So uh,
Right.
it becomes really hard at that point, but it can be viable to still try and mix and match your tight ends, but you got to still get a couple good ones. You can't just hope that you're getting the three guys at the bottom of the barrel and hoping they
Right.
come up with good scores. I mean, they'll have consistent, solid floor numbers, but they're never going to get those spike weeks for you.
Right. Well, I understand you're gonna let the draft dictate and you're not gonna force anything, but so would your ideal tight end combination in the puppy or the best ball mania, would it be like a try to get like a Kelsey and then two mid-tier? Or what is your ideal, like again, understanding that you need to let the draft come to you too.
So yeah, I mean, I think the other aspect with it is if you get a Kelsey in the first round or Mark Andrews in the second, Kyle Pitts and Darren Waller kind of in that third, fourth round, and then there's the slight tier below them that are still maybe viable, and we'll get to that in a second. Then you can maybe wait and just try and pick up value late. Guys like Hayden Hurst for the Bengals going late. Austin Hooper is a pretty decent role with the
Mm-hmm.
Titans. Sure, he's going late, and then even really late guys like Brevin Jordan with the Texans or Mo Alley Cox with the Colts. So there you don't have near as much pressure, because you might only need to fill in that one bye week or slightly get above, slightly increase your floor on the weeks that they really don't show up for whatever reason. But a guy like Travis Kelce is just so consistent. He only had 4 games under 10 fantasy points last year in half point PPR. The year before, I think he had 3, and he was even better that year in terms of his ceiling game. So, I mean, he's just consistent year in, year out. Mark
Right.
Andrews and Kittle are kind of in that consistency, a little more inconsistent, but you're still really strong with those guys.
So if you get a Travis Kelce, or even let's just say one of the top 3 or 4 tight ends, are you okay with just taking 2 tight ends?
Yes, especially if you then get a pretty good solid second guy, a guy who
Right.
you know has a pretty locked in role, maybe like a Tyler
Right.
Higbee or
Sure.
Hunter Henry. If you are going down to the Austin Hooper, Hayden Hurst role, then maybe you want to just still throw in a third guy just to ensure that,
Mhm.
in case Austin Hooper gets passed by that rookie the Titans took for some reason, or Hayden Hurst gets passed by Drew Sample, you maybe want a little bit more certainty there. But yeah, if you're getting a Kelsey, an Andrews, a Pitts, Waller, I think you can get by with 2 tight ends. So that offers you the positional flexibility also, which has some value.
Right, of course. But then I assume to the flip side of that, if you are kind of waiting and taking your first tight end in the mid rounds, I assume that is when you are pretty much taking 3 tight ends, I assume, correct?
Yeah, I think the issue with that is not only do you need to take 3 tight ends, but you need to kind of get two pretty much in the same area. If you get like a T.J. Hawkinson or a Dallas Goddard or even
Mhm.
Dawson Knox, who I really like, and actually I like above those other two, then you probably want to follow it up pretty quickly with a Mike Gesicki and Irv Smith,
Right.
somebody still in that mid tier, Pat Fryermuth. That way you're having those two guys alternating, and then even still, you still probably don't want to go all the way down to the Brevin Jordans and the Mo Alley Coxes. You probably want to get that, Hunter Henry, that guy who could have those touchdown spike weeks to help increase your ceiling and floor as you're competing with these Kelsey and Waller and Pitts lineups.
Right, of course. Okay, so now talk to me. How should we value the players in the top tiers versus their ADP?
So this is the one thing I think Travis Kelsey is in a tier of in and of himself. He's since 2016 he's been one or two in tight end scoring every single year, just blowing the door out of the water from the rest of the group. His fantasy points per game, again, half point PPR when we're talking underdog football, is pretty much every year would compare to a receiver in the top 10, typically between the 7 to 10 range, but I think one year it was even fifth or sixth. So this is a guy who can produce like an elite receiver, and he's shown it year in year out. So that's why we should have no doubt taking him in the especially the back half of the first round, or somehow early second if he slides there. Mark Andrews is a little bit more inconsistent, and so I think his ADP is a little higher than I like, because you are competing against some really good running backs in that area, the DeAndre Swifts, the Aaron Jordan or Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette, those types of guys, plus some really good receivers, T. Higgins. So it's a little tougher, I feel, to take him. I actually like Kyle Pitts and Darren Waller as more like mid third and fourth round type guys, because I think they give you almost as much upside. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if Kyle Pitts, if the touchdowns are there this year, I would almost guarantee he outscores Mark Andrews if he can get, say, 6 touchdowns this season. So because he should have more catches and probably more yards. So those guys, I think, have a little better value with their ADP, but all four of those guys are the guys you want leading your tight end room.
Okay. Now, what tight end could be the best value versus ADP? You just talked about Kyle Pitts. Is there some other ones similar to that?
So I think the guy that really stands out to me is that I like is Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz is going. Typically, he's the 10th, ninth, 10th, or 11th tight end. Right now, I believe it's around 10th tight end. And this is a guy who, after he was traded to the Cardinals last year, got the big upgrade in terms of style of offense, pace of play. Kyler Murray as his quarterback. If you extrapolate his numbers through the course of the year, he's gained almost 900 receiving yards, 5 to 6 touchdowns. That's right below these top tier guys, and yet he's going kind of like a level below that. I mean, he's going like in around the 100 area, maybe plus or minus 5 picks. So I think you're getting a guy who comes very close to top end tight end production. And remember, a few years ago with the Eagles, I think he was tight end 3 in the league. So
Right.
yes, he's a little older, but the Cardinals gave him a big deal. He's their
Mhm.
guy. People worry that they signed Trey McBride, but I have no doubt that Zach Ertz is being paid that amount of money to be their guy. And then on top of it, for the first 6 weeks,
Right.
there's
Hopkins.
no
Yeah.
DeAndre Hopkins. So
Right.
I think that's a big thing. But even when Hopkins is back, I think Ertz is probably like the third option on this team behind Hopkins, Hollywood Brown, and then Ertz. And this
Right.
is a team that throws enough that that's fine.
Right. Oh, absolutely. So who are your kind of your guys, your couple tight ends that you think could break out this season?
So in terms of breakout guys, because I think one interesting thing is last year was the year of the breakout tight end.
Hmm.
Guys like Gronk were going late in terms of ADP. Dawson Knox went really late. Dalton Schultz went extremely late. People thought that he wasn't even going to be the starter. That it
Hmm.
would be Blake Jarwin, and he ended up tight end 3 on the year. So people were getting major ADP value on those types of guys. I don't know if we're going to find that kind of jump this year, just because I feel like there's a lot more certainty. There's less unknown this year, and there's no like rookies like Pat Freiermuth was going kind of late last year. No rookie
Hmm.
this year figures to be an instant starter. So kind of the guys that I like later, um, Gerald Everett for the Chargers. He's been very inconsistent throughout his career. With the Rams, he was splitting time with Tyler Higbee. With the Seahawks last year, he was actually splitting time with Will Dissly. And he had some horrendous drops. We remember that 49ers game where I think he dropped 2 or 3 touchdowns in a single game. But
Right.
he's athletic. He's talented in his ability to get open. His hands are questionable, but drops, honestly, end of the day, we remember the big ones, but they don't matter in terms of fantasy. Maybe it gets you benched, but other than that, they don't matter in terms of fantasy. And he's now going with Justin Herbert. He's going from one of the slowest pace offense in the league in Seattle, who did have an elite quarterback, but extremely slow pace, to
Right.
Chargers and Justin Herbert. This Jared Cook, who is a good 10 years his senior, produced last year in a part-time tight end role. This year, I don't know if Darnell Parham's going to be back. It looks like Jared Everett's going to be their guy. And while Josh Palmer's a solid number 3 potential receiver option, we know that their starters are Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and then Eckler out of the backfield. But there's a big opening at tight end on this team. So I love Jared Everett. The other two that I would point to, David Njoku for the Browns. Again, they re-signed him to a big deal. They clearly want him involved. They let Austin Hooper go. So now that team went from 3 tight ends to 2.
And follow the money. Yeah.
You got to follow the money, and also, we while the Deshaun Watson situation is very concerning for guys like Amari Cooper or Donovan Peoples-Jones, I don't know if it's as concerning for Njoku. Jacoby Brissett has been solid in targeting tight ends throughout his career, both with the Colts and the Dolphins. So, he actually might be a beneficiary if Watson's
Right.
missing a significant amount of time as somebody who can get open quick and make plays after the catch, because he's just so athletically talented. So I like him. He's going pretty late. I think he's tied in 20 or 21 right now. So I think you're getting some good value, and definitely spike weeks, which of course in best ball, that's what we're looking for. We're
Right.
looking for guys. If he's your number 2 tight end, you're looking for those big spike weeks, and he can give it to you.
Okay. Um, any other tight ends to kind of summarize this that you are targeting, whether it's, early, mid, late? We know you talked about like the Kelsey and then the other three. You talked about some of those guys later. Are there any other guys that you find yourself drafting a lot in best ball drafts and on Underdog that you have a high percentage of?
So I think I'll give you one in the mid tier and one in the late tier that I have a high percentage on both. The one in the mid
Sure.
tier is Irv Smith. Um,
Yep. I like that.
a couple years ago, it was Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith, and if you
Hmm.
combine their tight end numbers together, they were actually pretty impressive. 700, 800 yards, 9, 12 touchdowns, those type of numbers, and that's at a time when the Vikings had one of the lowest pass rates in the league. They benefited obviously with good quarterback play, but even then they had top receivers like Stephon Diggs, like Adam Thielen. They still had those. Well, now Justin Jefferson's replaced Diggs, but they still have that kind of mentality of 2
Hmm.
elite wide receivers. Kevin O'Connell is going to come in. They're going to be in 11 personnel. There's no other tight end really in the room. I just think they throw, and
Hmm.
I think Irv Smith's going to be good. I don't know if he has a ceiling because there are the alpha receivers there. There is Dalvin Cook. So, he just might not have that ultimate ceiling, but I think he's going to be
But for best ball, yeah.
best ball. I think he'll give you some big spike weeks when they really have to throw as expected this year. And I just like that situation. And let's not forget, Kevin O'Connell came up in the Patriots organization as a quarterback. He's been with some other coaching staffs as well. He knows the value of tight end in the NFL. So
Mhm.
I just think that, and Kirk Cousins, in his time in Washington, loved throwing the ball to the tight ends.
Jordan Reed, yeah.
Reed,
Yeah.
Fred Davis. So, I just think it's getting underlooked. I mean, there's some buzz about it, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he ends up like tight end 8 this year. And then the later guy is a guy I mentioned before, Austin Hooper. Didn't work
Mhm.
out with Cleveland, but that was kind of a mess. They just had so many tight ends, and they never gave him the opportunity. He now goes to Tennessee. Dave Robert Woods there. Who knows what's going on with Traylon Burks? The rest of the wide receivers are very questionable. Austin Hooper, it just seems like he's going to be on the field. They did draft a tight end
Yeah.
in rounds, but the buzz is that Hooper has this job, and I think Ryan Tannehill is going to just pepper him with targets. So I
I
like
like it.
where he's going late. Again, he's probably more of a floor play. He's not going to have a really 100-yard games or anything like that, but he'll have some 6 for 50 and a touchdown and be
Right.
in multiple weeks.
Right. Okay. Well, I like this conversation, and we're going to continue the best ball conversation each week moving forward as we go through the summer. So be sure to check back each week as we have a lot more great best ball content. And remember, if you're not on Underdog yet, you got to check it out. Use code FANSPEAK, get up to $100 deposit bonus. They give you match your deposit 100%. So you can't beat that. Before you get out of here, be sure to like this episode, subscribe to the Fanspeak Network, and follow Steve at SteveOSpeak and me on Twitter at Megs08DFS. Until next time, guys, we'll see you then. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.